What is it like just a couple weeks out from the start of training camp? You'll hear a conversation with the guy that knows all about that plus more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 8th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And as always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show has grown so much in such a short amount of time, and that's because of the support of Raider Nation and because of my man Ari does a fantastic job making sure we're on YouTube. We're looking good. We're sounding good. Takes a ton of pride in his work, and we definitely appreciate that. You can check him out, shout him out on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can hit me up as well, as many of you do, at your boy Q254. Normally, we have the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. We won't have any calls or texts coming up on today's show. I have a really good conversation with former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag. He was drafted Mr. Irrelevant back in 2003 by the Silver and Black, and, well, honestly, in the last 6 months has become a really good friend of mine, but joined my radio show last week to talk all things training camp, what to think a couple weeks out, what to think about this Raiders quarterback competition, the weapons that the quarterbacks are going to have around him, what he's thinking about the job Antonio Pierce is doing, and a whole lot more. So a really good, informative conversation that I had last week with former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2 and segment number 3. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day. Just very little that was collected because, as we all know, it is the dead time when it comes to the NFL. Not a whole lot going on, but I do have a little something for you here in segment number 1, and we'll jump into that right after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. You know, the playoffs, done deal records when it comes to the NBA and the NHL. That's done. Finals, all that's over. But don't worry, there's plenty of sports still on. Baseball's going on. WNBA action is going on. It's fantastic. FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com. Started today. I'll tell you more about them later on in the show. But off top, want to just tell you about our quick trip to Texas. Me and the wife took. We took off on Friday and got back in town on Sunday. And the reason why we took off and went to Waco, Texas was for John McClain. John McClain, really good friend, been covering the NFL for very long, has been doing an annual softball game with different media members. Waco Trib Media is one team, and then John McClain's team is the other. He's been doing it for about 42 years. And he's had me involved in probably the last, 5 or 6 years. But since I've moved from Texas to Las Vegas, hasn't had the opportunity to play in the game. And I really do enjoy playing in the game. It's a lot of fun, regardless if we win or lose. And, well, we lost. We lost both games. But it was a lot of fun. We were out there at Baylor University. They let us use their softball field. So that was a lot of fun. I thought I did really well. I did 3 for 5 in game 1, 3 for 5 in game 2. Hit a home run in game 1, hit a home run in game 2, and scored a bunch of runs. So I had a lot of fun, right? Played left field, try to get my Ricky Henderson on, as everyone who's listened to this show for any amount of time knows. That's my favorite player. So I tried to do my best Ricky Henderson impersonation. Not so good. But, hey, 47 years old, you're going to do what you're going to do, right? So I had a lot of fun out there. I feel like the other team probably had about 16 players, and we had about 9. But, at the end of the day, who cares, right? Just out there having a whole lot of fun. So that was the reason why we took off and made a quick trip up to Texas. I told everyone, when the general calls and asks you to play in the softball game, then you go out there and play. And he hit me up on, I want to say Wednesday, and said, man, we sure could use your bat in the lineup. I thought, well, maybe. And we've thought about it before since we moved from Texas here. We thought about it before going, and I was like, no, that's not going to work out. But with the 4th of July being on Thursday and being able to get the day off on Friday as well, I thought, why not? Why don't we make a weekend of it, go play in the softball game, go see some family and friends, and I really had a good opportunity to do that and really catch up with some family that we haven't seen in a long time. So that was a whole lot of fun. So that was our weekend. That's what we did, and it was fantastic. Now, I did want to bring you a little bit of sound that has to do with the Silver and Black, and this is something I've been talking about for a while, is that, more and more I feel like media members are starting to talk more about the Raiders, and I think a lot more people are starting to look at the Raiders and say, you know what, there could be a chance, but obviously the big elephant in the room is the quarterback. Can they get the quarterback situation figure it out. So I ran across this audio, and it was actually from a few weeks ago from NFL Network, where Tom Pelissero, a good friend of the show, Omar Ruiz, and also Brian Baldinger were all involved in this. And I thought it was some really good stuff, and this actually took place before the SAC Summit that happened at UNLV that Max Crosby and many other Raiders were a part of. But I thought it was some really good conversation just about the Raiders from NFL Network. So check it out. You might enjoy it. Tom Pelissero, Omar Ruiz, and Brian Baldinger.
Can one of these guys help the Raiders return to those glory days? I give them a mustache game that's probably tops in the power rankings in the entire NFL with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Can they actually help with the offense? We'll let our guys Omar Ruiz and Brian Baldinger break that down for us. Omar, I'll start with you here. We know that this is an open competition. Certainly Aiden O'Connell, we've seen some positive comments from guys like Davante Adams about him. What do you make of the competition as we get set in the lead up to training camp?
That it's a legitimate one, Tom, a legit quarterback competition, albeit a friendly one. We'll get to more on that in a little bit. They're all saying they've seen growth and comfortability from Aiden O'Connell in year 2. In fact, Davante Adams and Max Crosby both saying they appreciate seeing O'Connell talk trash to the defense, a sign that he's more comfortable leading this football team and leading this offense. As far as Gardner Minshew, they've seen him demonstrate what's allowed him to be a successful and operational starting quarterback in his time in the NFL, seemingly his swagger, the perfect style for that Raider organization. Offensive coordinator Luke Getsy saying they'll be evaluated in how they operate the offense, how they take care of the football, and of course, how they make plays and produce. And Antonio Pierce, head coach, not speaking specifically about the quarterback competition, but perhaps driving a big hint by saying that the people that are going to play are the people that understand the playbook. As for that playbook, of course, Luke Getsy overlapped with Davante Adams in Green Bay 7 of the 8 years that Adams was there. So studying a lot of Davante Adams tape as they install that offense, and Davante Adams demonstrating even more of a leadership position given his familiarity with the offense, certainly helping these quarterbacks come along and learn Getsy's system, Baldy.
You know, Omar, what really has me interested and excited is their defense right now. You know, and when Antonio Pierce took over the head coaching job, from that point on, they gave up the fewest points in the league last year, and they kept the whole defensive staff. Patrick Graham, the defense coordinator, Rob Leonard, Rob Ryan. And now you add Christian Wilkins to that front. And I'm going to be out there at the SAC Summit in Las Vegas at the end of the month with Max Crosby and Tyree Wilson. I think this defense has a chance. You look at Spillane and Diablo, they return as the inside linebackers. The safeties return intact. They got a big lift once Jack Jones joined the team a year ago. They finished 9th in total defense last year, Omar. I'm excited about the potential of what this defense can do in the direction that they were going. And up until this point, it always seemed like the defense outside of Max Crosby was on shaky ground. Well, I think that ground is pretty firm right now, and I think they're going in the right direction.
Yeah, certainly confident heading into year 3 with defensive coordinator Patrick Graham. And this reminds me of a conversation I had with Max Crosby last year, an advice he got from Tom Brady, who had been visiting practice. And he said, leadership is great, but also surrounding yourself with other leaders. And that's exactly what they found in Christian Wilkins. They've been pushing each other, the first and second in the buildings each and every day for Raiders practice. When Max Crosby makes a play at practice, Christian Wilkins comes and wants to do a play at practice. And Gardner Minshew saying that no matter what is going on the practice field, eventually Christian Wilkins shows up in the play, shows up on tape later when they watch it at practice. So if Crosby finally has that foil with him, speaks to how much more this Raiders defense could develop here in Graham's 3rd year as defensive coordinator.
So I just, when I find something like that come across some conversation about the Raiders, I like to bring it to the table, because more times than not we talk about, well, nobody's talking about the Raiders. Nobody's talking about the Raiders. So when I find someone or something and I see an entity that is talking about the Raiders, like to bring it to the table. So again, I thought that, there's some guys right there in Tom Pelissero, Omar Ruiz, and Brian Baldinger that see that this team has a chance to be good. They've just got to figure it out. The quarterback position. And we know who the players are going to be. We know who the competition is going to be, O'Connell or Minshew. We just don't know what it looks like until training camp opens up and then gets going, and then preseason gets rolling, and then we'll know sooner rather than later what it's going to look like. But some good stuff, I thought, from Pelissero, Ruiz, and Brian Baldinger from the NFL Network. Coming up in segment number 2, part 1 of my conversation with former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag, as we talk all things training camp, even starting out a couple weeks out from training camp, as we all are right now. We'll get into that in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we do that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And we know I love sports. Hell, went all the way to Texas to play sports, right? Went to Texas to play some softball. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. Matter of fact, as soon as we got back in town, first thing I did, boom, pop on ESPN and the Aces game. The Aces were playing the Dallas Wings, and the Aces won that game and just happened to be able to catch the last of it. Then I was watching some Sunday Night Baseball. I love sports. Anytime there's sports on TV, I'm going to be watching it. If there's sports in town, I'm going to be there. That's just what it's like. FanDuel lets sports keep going whenever I want. All you got to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So go over to FanDuel.com, start making the most of your summer. Which, don't forget, the All-Star game for baseball is right around the corner as well. The lineups have been announced. Fantastic players. A lot of young talent in Major League Baseball to get excited about. But head all over to FanDuel. Check it out. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into part 1 of my conversation I had with Ryan Hoag, former Raiders wide receiver. He was drafted Mr. Irrelevant back in 2003. And over the past, I'll say, 6 to 8 months, we've become really good friends, really close. I got to see him at the Raiders alumni wellness event not too long ago at the M Resort, where I got to talk to many different former players, including Ryan Hoag. But he's a really good dude. He's a guy that's getting into the broadcasting scene, so him being a guest on my radio show is something that we're going to try to consistently make happen, especially during the regular season. And he's a very sharp football mind, as you'll hear. That's why I really wanted to bring this conversation to the table. I think you'll really enjoy it. So here's part 1 of the conversation with former Raiders wide receiver Ryan Hoag. Starts off talking about training camp being just a couple weeks out. What is it like preparing for training camp when you're a couple weeks out?
Yeah, I tell you what, it's my favorite time of year, and you know, despite being several years out of the league, I still get goosebumps and excited. Just the thought of it. You smell the grass in the morning. You just remember. You get those flashbacks to those days of training camp and being in the heat and just knowing that what your body's about to go through and kind of just mentally preparing for all that. Right now, you know, most of the guys I would imagine are doing everything they can to take care of their body, right? You know that you're in front of 16-hour days are staring at you in the face for, 5 weeks of training camp or whatever it ends up being. And so most guys are just trying to take care of their body, get their mind right. And, there's not a lot. You're not going to make a team from now until the start of training camp, right? We're 2-3 weeks away. So they're just trying to make sure they're in tip-top shape and ready to roll.
2003, you were selected by the Raiders. You were, at the time, they called it Mr. Irrelevant, but I don't think we call it Mr. Irrelevant. And I remember seeing you not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, and you had your Irrelevant T-shirt. I thought it was awesome. So we're definitely going to keep that party rolling. But for a guy that was in that kind of position, what was going through your mindset when you knew training camp was here and you've got to scratch and claw and do everything you can to make the roster in some capacity?
Well, I tell you, definitely different from year 1 to year 2, and then year 2 to 3, and so on. I obviously was in 6 NFL camps and then NFL Europe and a bunch of camps. So I actually had the opportunity. I think I was in about 11 training camps, 6 in the league. But my first year, you just don't know what to expect. And I think the biggest thing for me, and obviously I was coming from a Division III school, so it's a little different, but I would say every college player would attest to this, that, in college I could go 80% and beat everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And I say that with as much humility as possible, just because I was gifted more athletically than most of the people I was competing against. So I could leave practice feeling good and having everybody tell me how great I was because I just had certain attributes that certain people didn't have. Right? When you get to the pros, you have to go 100% just to fit in. And when your body isn't used to working at that tempo and that capacity, it's really, really challenging. You add that into the fact that our install in all of college was the equivalent, and I kid you not, of one day of the West Coast offense with the Raiders. And just the understanding, like I was an academic All-American. Everybody was like, oh, you're going to, stand out because of that. That doesn't, right? There's a difference between smart and football smart, kind of like street smarts versus book smarts.
Yep.
Like football smart is if I don't understand certain route concepts or the fact that we're trying to win at 3 different levels and we have to impact the defense at that low, medium, and deep level, like that was foreign to me going into the pros. And everything's conceptual in the pros, right? It's like, hey, these are the 3 places we have to attack the defense, depending on where you are when you line up or where the defense shifts to or where you end up after the ball is snapped because you're in motion, right? It's going to change your responsibility for that concept. And for me, like it was just memorizing, 471 in college. Like, oh, I know that I have a post if I'm a Z or a dig route if I'm an X, right? In the pros, it's like, spider 2, Y monkey, X spacing. And so all these different terminologies are telling different people what kind of concept we're playing. And so, again, not only physically was it so demanding, but mentally, you go back to your room and now you have 100 more plays you have to memorize. And you're not just memorizing your position because you have to know the concept, not just what Z does. And I was a Z receiver. So it's hard as a rookie.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be hard as a veteran too, but I mean that's why that's why you guys are in the position that you guys are in. Worked obviously your tail to get to the position that you were in. Again, former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag is with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920. So we know for the Raiders when they get to camp, there's going to be a quarterback competition. You were a wide receiver. What are you looking for from a wide receiver position from a quarterback? Like how does a quarterback set you up the best?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember, I had the opportunity my second year, I was with the Giants, and that's when we drafted Eli Manning. And Eli Manning, I was there for that rookie mini camp, and I kid you not, like he came into the huddle, and he was there was so much pressure, obviously, right? He forced his way out of not being drafted by San Diego, and he's in New York media and this and that, so I get it. And obviously he went on to have an amazing career, but that guy was so nervous in the huddle. Like everybody was like, why did we draft this guy that high? Every single player on the team was just kind of looking around because he was just like fumbling his words. And so for me as a receiver, like when a quarterback goes in the huddle and you just feel them command that huddle and like gives you that opportunity, hey Ryan, alert, if that corner's pressing, I'm coming to you. Like if you feel like the quarterback's got your back, like that makes all the difference. And I had the opportunity of playing with like Brad Johnson. He was one of those vets that just, if you were a grinder, a hard worker, he loved you. Rich Gannon, same way. If you were a grinder, a hard worker, like he believed in you. Just don't make mental errors, and they got your back. And then I played with rookie quarterbacks that kind of like and that's not to say anything bad about Eli, but Eli's rookie minicamp, you go back and look, like he's throwing off his back foot into triple coverage. Like he had no command of the offense because. Again, these expectations are just out of this world. What I'm looking for with the Raiders in particular is, you got Aiden O'Connell coming with a year of experience now, and you got Gardner Minshew, who's kind of like the ultimate backup quarterback. He's the NFL fans' best friend, right? And he's kind of just been a winner wherever he's gone. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see like who the offense gravitates to. I mean, my insiders are kind of saying that it was back and forth in the offseason here, and but my thought is if it's back and forth and it's really like 6 and 1, half dozen the other, I'm going with Aiden O'Connell because he's on a rookie contract, and when you can win with a quarterback on a rookie contract, you can sign guys, you get guys to buy in, and it provides so much flexibility as an organization, and I love Gardner Minshew. I hope he's actually the starter because I'm a big Gardner Minshew fan. But what I'm hearing is it's pretty close. And really, who does Devontae Adams feel the most comfortable with? And I know he has a pretty strong rapport with Aiden. So we'll see what happens.
So there was part one of the conversation right there with former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag, again drafted Mr. Irrelevant back in 2003. Really good dude. And as you could tell by what the conversation sounded like just in part one of our conversation, a really sharp football mind. So definitely someone that I enjoy talking the game with. So coming up in segment number 3, we'll have part 2 of the conversation. Well, we'll start talking about the weapons that the Raiders have, something that I've been trying to point out to a lot of folks, right? A lot of quarterbacks don't walk into a great situation like the Raiders have with a Devontae Adams, a Jacoby Myers, a Brock Bowers, a Michael Mayer, obviously Zamir White and Alexander Madison as the running back position. Like, whoever wins that quarterback position is going to have the good weapons around him. All he's got to do is make it do what it do. So we'll start talking that coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to jump into part 2 of my conversation with former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag. He was a guest on my radio show, I believe on Wednesday last week, but we had a really good conversation, as you could tell by part 1. Now we jump into part 2, and we start off talking about the weapons that the quarterback, whoever earns the starting quarterback spot, whether it's Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, or a combination of both, will have at their disposal. You know, Ryan, for this situation with these two quarterbacks, to have the Devontae Adams, to have a Jacoby Myers, to draft a Brock Bowers and have a Michael Mayer, how good of a situation is it for both of those guys to be able to at least be in an offense with those kind of weapons around them?
Yeah, it's similar to what Caleb Williams is walking into, which is unheard of for a rookie, right? If you're the number one draft pick, usually you're on a terrible team, and you're walking into a situation where, you know, you're looking at 2 years of probably losing football before you have a chance. And so, you know, a quarterback's best friend is short, safe routes, right? And usually that's coming from the running back, and it's coming from underneath, like a good slot receiver like Jacoby, or tight ends. And when you can have an offense with 2 tight ends, like the Raiders project to have, right? And you can have extra protection if you need it, right? And you can have also late outlets. Like, that's a quarterback's best friend. So a quarterback can become really comfortable really quickly in that kind of offense because they always have an outlet, and not just an outlet to dump out, but a guy that has a little wiggle, right? Brock Bowers, his yards after catch is really, really good. And that makes, you know, that can make you look really good. And, you know, some of the best quarterbacks in the history of the league, like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, those guys don't necessarily just chuck the ball down the field. They're throwing, you know, they're setting their guys up for success with short routes in space and letting them go be athletes. And that's, for me, like, as a guy that ended up moving from Z to the zebra position, or the slot position, like, I love having a two-way go and being able to kind of navigate my way with option routes. And when a quarterback hits you in stride and you're able to just be your athletic self, man, that's fun.
I remember you being a big fan of that Brock Bowers selection by Tom Telesco.
Yeah. And actually, I was just out in Newport Beach this last week for Irrelevant Week. We were celebrating our 49th Irrelevant Week, and Jalen Key was Mr. Irrelevant this year. He's a safety out of University of Alabama, and he told me without a doubt Brock Bowers was the best tight end that they faced. They had a game plan against him. He said it wasn't even close how good Brock Bowers was, and so that also, like, when it's coming from, you know, and DBs aren't often ones to admit when a guy is tough to cover. You know, receivers and DBs have a long-standing feud of who's the better athlete and this and that. Like, DBs never show their hand. He was emphatic with praise about Brock Bowers, and that got me even more excited about this season.
Well, you know, and it's very rare that a guy from Alabama is going to give a guy from Georgia love, too.
Right. I know, especially if you're coached by Nick Saban.
Right, exactly, that part. Again, former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag is with us here on Unnecessary Roughness, Raider Nation Radio 920. So when you look at these quarterbacks and what they have to do, obviously, and learn the offense and be able to take command of it, how much of it, Ryan, is between the ears? How much do they have to have a clear understanding of not just where to go with the ball, but how to set their wide receiver up for success?
Yeah, I think it starts with comfort with Luke Getzke's his new system he's implementing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to be your offense coordinator's, second hand. You got to be second set of eyes, and you got to be their best friend. And because the offense coordinator is the one that's going to be setting you up for success and knowing what you're comfortable with, meeting with you every single day. Hey, what are you most comfortable with? How are we going to script for success? And so that all goes back to your point of being, it starts with between the ears. And obviously, it's going to be more challenging for Aiden because he's seeing a different system, so early in his career, right? And he might have just been getting familiar, going 5-4 last year as a starter, and now he's got systems are significantly different because the verbiage is different, and it's hard to command a huddle if I'm trying to remember in my head
Right.
what the play call is. And if I'm trying to remember what the play call is, can I remember what my reads are? Is it high to low? Is it low to high? Is it left to right? Right?
Yeah.
And then I have to remember, okay, how can I keep my number one receiver happy in Devontae Adams? All right? And then how can I make sure I'm doing the right thing and progressing the way that my new offensive coordinator, Luke, wants? All those things factor in. And when you're a guy like Gardner Minshew that's played for probably is his fifth system, I would guess.
Yeah.
Because he's had a couple different coaching changes when he's been in Jacksonville and Indianapolis and things like that. Right? He's seen everything under the sun. And so for him to be able to command a huddle, which, he's got a quirky personality as it is, he's going to command a huddle regardless of where he is, right? It's probably going to be easy for him at the start of training camp to just be like, all right, hey, let's do this. Here's the expectation. I know I've been here before, whereas Aiden's kind of in uncharted waters. But again, I go back to if it's close, right? I mean, Gardner kind of always gets boned in the sense that, like, he's probably always maybe just a little better than the person he's competing with, but there's always going to be, like, fanfare to go the other way just because of politics or draft status or whatever. And again, that's why, come week 5, he's fans' best friend because, if you start and go 1-4, then you have a tough decision to make.
Right, exactly. And this is fantastic. And we'll close out with this, Ryan. No matter who ends up getting that starting quarterback position, whether it's Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew or a combination of the two, how much better do you think they'll be having to go up against that defense that is the Raiders' defense each and every day in practice?
Man, I think that defense is significantly underrated. Again, I know we talked about this a month ago when we were at the Wellness Weekend, but when you can get pressure on a quarterback using just your front four, that can make your secondary look like all pros. Right? I'm going to say that again. When you can get pressure using just your front four, you can make your secondary look like all pros. I go back to the 2007, 2008 Giants when they had Osi Umenyiora and Michael Strahan coming, right, just pinning their ears back as defensive linemen. Like, think about how disruptive that defensive line was. They were Super Bowl champs. Can you name like a starting secondary player on that team? No, but they never got exposed. those were just guys, right? But they didn't get exposed because that D-line were just monsters and collapsed that pocket and made you have to get rid of that football quickly. And obviously in training camp it's a little different because you can't hit the quarterback. But guess what? If the center is in your face as you're throwing the ball because he's getting driven back, or your right tackle or whatever it is because Max Crosby, just drove block him back. Like, you got to make a quick decision. And yeah, if they can have success against that defense and in going against that every day in practice, it's going to seem so easy going against even teams as good as the Kansas City Chiefs and the Chargers, who have really elite defenses. But they're not any better than the Raiders.
There it is. There it was right there. That's the conversation with former Raider wide receiver Ryan Hoag. Again, hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. I know I enjoyed it. The whole time that I'm talking to him, I'm literally just fist pumping and throwing my hands in the air and celebrating. And I'm kind of weird like that, right? When you get a good guest on and you're getting good answers and, really good conversation going and it feels like it's very informative, I start really getting excited and fired up like I'm winning a game or something, knowing that I ain't playing no game. I'm just doing a radio show. But there's certain times when you get certain guests on that's really fantastic, and I thought Ryan was great, and I really look forward to the fall when he's able to be on my radio show consistently. Like I said, trying to seal the deal on that, to have him on at least as once a week guest, maybe even twice, maybe once to review the game that just happened, and then maybe another time to preview the upcoming games, similar to what I do with Lincoln Kennedy. And again, I'm very blessed. I never take it for granted to have these opportunities in front of me to be able to speak with these former players, regardless if it's a star like Lincoln Kennedy was a star, or if it's a guy like Ryan Hoag that spent a minute with the Raiders, but still is very familiar with the game. Like, it doesn't really matter. These guys at one time, I say it all the time, were the best of the best, no matter where they played, no matter where they went to school. At one point in their life, they were the very best of the very best. And then when you get to the NFL, it's very humbling because you're getting all the best at all the same time. And then you look around, it's like, wow, all these guys were the best, right? I mean, it's funny just being in high school and whatever, you go and you'll see, okay, that guy's great. Okay, he's the best athlete on this team or whatever. Now you're getting all of those guys all in the same team, all the best athletes, all the best football players from all over, all on the same team. So it's pretty humbling. It's pretty incredible. The opportunities that have been presented and have been around me based off being here in Las Vegas and part of Raider Nation Radio 920 and being able to provide this podcast as well on the daily. So coming up tomorrow, we'll get back to more calls and texts. We'll have more news and notes, and we'll really start counting down in the days, right, to training camp. And once we get to training camp, man, it is going to be full throttle. I cannot wait to get down there to the training camp facility and be able to check out what this team is doing and how they put it all together and be able to bring it to you on the daily here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.